The message arrived at 7:14 inches the evening on the 12th of October, 2024. Our 40th wedding anniversary. Darling, the board's gone into overtime again. I'll be lucky to be home by midnight. Have a wine for me. 40 years and counting. Love you to the moon. 2 heart emojis. A wine glass. A little dancing woman in a red dress. The cheerful punctuation of a woman who had been deceiving me for 19 months and had grown so easy in the lying that she could trim it with cartoon flourishes the way she used to trim her scones with cream. I was sitting in my old Hilux ute in the car park behind the Pier Master, a seafood restaurant on Tamaki Drive in Mission Bay, looking out at the harbor, where the lights of the Devonport ferry were sliding across the black water, like coins down a felt table. I was wearing the navy blazer I had bought 3 weeks earlier from an op shop in Onehunga, because retired carpenters do not have Smith & Kowhai's budgets, and a man's 40th anniversary only happens once. I had wanted to look like I understood that. There were native flowers on the passenger seat. A small bunch of kowhai and harakeka had pinched from my own back garden in Mount Eden, because she had carried kowhai at our wedding in 1984, and I had given them to her every 12th of October for 40 years. This year I had wanted to put them in her hand at the table, watch her face, see if she still looked at me the way she had when she was 26 and I was 30, and we were standing in a registry office in Newmarket with no money and a rented suit and an absolute conviction that we knew what forever meant. I read the message again. Board's gone into overtime. I almost drove home. Almost rang my brother-in-law Pete to see if he wanted to share a jug at the local. Almost let the evening dissolve into the soft routine of a man whose wife was always at the firm, always running late, always just past the edge of the lamplight. But I had paid the deposit weeks back, $85 non-refundable, and $85 matters when you have stepped down to part-time and your super is doing more praying than earning. So I decided I would walk in, eat a proper meal alone, drink a glass of something I could not pronounce, and lift it quietly to 40 years of marriage with no one across from me but the harbor. That decision, the decision to step out of the ute instead of turning the key the other way, is the reason this story exists at all. I walked into the Pier Master at 8:20. The young woman at the lectern smiled at me with that slightly forced sweetness that people reserve for older blokes dining alone, and walked me to a small two-top near the back, alongside a window that looked out onto the side terrace. I ordered a glass of Pinot Noir from the Wairarapa. I set the kowhai and harakeka on the empty chair across from me. I picked up the menu, and then I looked up. Across the dining room, partly screened by a low timber slat partition that separated the main floor from a quieter raised section near the kitchen, I saw the dress. Not a dress. The dress. The deep emerald shift she had bought at Smith & Kowhai's 6 months earlier. The one she had modeled for me in the bedroom and turned around in twice and said she was saving for something proper. She was wearing it at the Pier Master. On our anniversary. The anniversary she could not be at because the board had run into overtime. She was sitting across from a man, sandy hair gone to gray. A deep tan that does not come from Auckland in October. An open-collar shirt under a charcoal jacket that had been cut by someone who knew the shape of his shoulders. He was leaning toward her, his hand resting on hers on the white tablecloth. There was a bottle of champagne sweating in a silver bucket beside the table. 2 flutes. The proper kind, with the thin stems, the kind that show up in places where the entree alone costs more than my weekly grocery bill. He said something. She laughed. The laugh I used to hear from the kitchen when the kids were small, and I had said something that surprised her into being 26 again. The unguarded one, the real one. She was giving that laugh to a man whose name I did not yet know. And then she leaned across the white linen and kissed him. Not a peck. Not a friendly press of lips. A real kiss, slow and easy. The kind of kiss that has a history behind it and a hotel room ahead of it. The kind of kiss I had not been given by my own wife in the better part of a year. I could not get a breath. The room collapsed into one high, thin tone, the way a bandsaw sounds when the blade is about to bind. My hands gripped the edge of the table hard enough that my knuckles went white, and the small bones in my wrists ached the way they had not ached since I was 45 and still framing two-story homes. My vision narrowed until the whole of the Pier Master was that emerald dress and that gray-blonde head and that kiss. I stood up. I was going to walk over there. I was going to look down at my wife of 40 years and ask her how the boardroom was going. I was going to take that bucket of champagne and tip it slowly into that man's lap. I was going to make a scene that every diner in Mission Bay would still be telling at dinner parties at Christmas. I made it 2 steps before a hand closed firmly around my forearm, just above the wrist, the way a nurse takes hold of you before she puts a needle in. "Sit down, now." The voice was low, female, calm, in the particular way that some women are calm, not relaxed, controlled. The calm of someone who has spent decades being the steady one in a room full of people who were losing their grip. I turned. A woman I had never seen in my life was standing beside my chair. Late 50s, silver gray hair cut short and practical, a dark blazer over a plain white shirt, no rings, a watch on her left wrist that looked like it had been chosen for accuracy rather than ornament. She had the bearing of a person who had spent 30 years standing in courtrooms or hospital corridors or both. She did not look apologetic. She did not look unsure. "Let go of my arm. Sit down first. Then I'll let go. Lady, I don't know who the hell you are, but my wife is across the room kissing another man, and I've earned my right to make a scene." She did not raise her voice. She did not tighten her grip. She just looked at me with the steadiest pair of gray eyes I think I have ever seen. "I know who that man is. I know who your wife is. I know exactly what's happening at that table. And I'm asking you, not telling you, to sit down. Because if you walk over there now, you'll get 10 seconds of satisfaction and lose every single thing that's owed to you. The real performance hasn't started yet." Something in the way she said it stopped me. Not the words, the weight underneath them. This woman was not improvising. She was not guessing. She knew something I did not know, and the knowing was as solid in her as the floor under my feet. I sat down. Slowly. She let go of my arm and sat in my wife's chair, beside my native flowers, as easily as if we had reserved the table for 2, and she had simply been delayed. "My name is Nguyer Thornberry. I'm a forensic investigator. I've been retained for the past 4 months by a woman named Patience Hollander. Does that surname mean anything to you yet? It will. Patience Hollander is the second former wife of the man your wife is currently kissing. His name is Roland Castell Burrows. He's the managing partner of Castell Burrows Holdings, the property and investment firm where your wife is general counsel. And their affair, my friend, is about to cost him 8 million New Zealand dollars. I stared at her. Across the restaurant, a young waiter was bringing my wife and Roland Castell Burrows a second bottle of champagne. My anniversary kowhai were already wilting at the edges in the chair beside me. And a complete stranger had just told me that the slow death of my marriage was a footnote in someone else's revenge. "You're going to need to explain that to me." "Slowly, I will. But first I need something from you." "Which is?" "Patience. Half an hour of it. Don't approach that table. Don't confront them. Don't let them see you. I have a colleague outside on the terrace with a long lens camera and another at the Sofitel in Viaduct Harbor, where Mr. and Castell Burrows has a standing arrangement in Suite 1106. If you blow this open here, in this room, you'll get a shouting match, a smashed champagne flute, and a story your wife's lawyer will use to paint you as unstable for the next 18 months. If you wait, you'll get the lot. The lot meaning what? Evidence. Leverage. The truth about your wife of 40 years that goes well past the man she's kissing tonight. She glanced toward the bar. Order another wine. Breathe. And let me tell you what we've found. I ordered the wine. I breathed. And Geyer Thornberry told me a story that turned the champagne across the room into something poisonous in my imagination. Roland Castell-Burrows is 58. He inherited the bones of the firm from his father in 1998 and built it into what it is today. Property syndicates, commercial leases, a private investment arm, net worth somewhere north of 45 million New Zealand. 2 ex-wives, 3 adult children, none of whom speak to him. His first marriage ended in 2009. Unremarkable. His second marriage, to my client Patience Hollander, ended in 2020. The reason it ended was that Patience discovered her husband was having an affair with the firm's senior associate solicitor, a young woman named Imogen Whitcomb. I felt something turn over inside my chest. Senior associate. Imogen worked under him for 3 years. The affair lasted close to 2 of those years. When Patience found out, she retained the most aggressive matrimonial lawyer in Auckland. The settlement came in at $6.5 million. But it carried an unusual provision, a fidelity clause. What's that? A specific contractual provision in their separation agreement, agreed by both parties and signed in front of witnesses, that if Mr. Castell-Burrows engaged in another affair with a member of his professional staff within 7 years of the date of separation, he would owe Patience a further $8 million on top of the original settlement. Is that even legal here? In New Zealand, contractual penalty provisions in separation agreements are enforceable so long as they are specific, proportionate to a foreseeable loss, and signed without duress. His own lawyer warned him not to sign it. He signed it anyway. He was vain enough to believe he could keep his hands to himself for 7 years. She took a small sip of water. He could not. Your wife, Marigold, is the firm's general counsel. She started at Castell-Burrows Holdings in 2017. From our surveillance and from records subpoenaed in a related civil matter, the affair between her and Roland began in March 2023. 19 months. I thought about the last 19 months. The new firm laptop she had brought home and set up in the spare room with a lock on the door for client confidentiality. The Sunday meetings. The leadership retreats up at Waiheke. The clothes she had begun wearing that did not match the salary I knew she earned. The way she had stopped reaching for me in bed and started turning her phone face down on the nightstand. 19 months of small, careful lies, and I had swallowed every one of them with my dinner like they were peas off my plate. There is more, Geyer said. And this part is the part that matters to you. She slid a single folded sheet across the table. A bank statement with a logo I recognized from the Britomart precinct. ASB, Britomart. An account in the sole name of Marigold Fay Whitfield. During our investigation of Mr. Castell-Burrows, my forensic accountant flagged a pattern of payments going out of one of his shell entities. An LLP called Harbourline Advisory. It has no clients, no listed staff, no functional office. Its entire purpose, as best we can tell, is to make a monthly payment to your wife of $15,000. I looked at the sheet, the account number, the balance, $273,412.16. 19 monthly deposits, each one $15,000, each one tagged, in plain black print, Harbourline Advisory consulting fee. What is Harbourline Advisory? A shell. Registered through a company's office filing in late 2022, around the time the affair began. No commercial activity beyond paying your wife. The total to date is just under $290,000. She has been receiving it into an account you almost certainly know nothing about. I set the bank statement down very carefully, the way you set down a glass that has cracked but has not yet leaked. I picked up my wine. I put it down without drinking. My hands were doing that small tremor again. The loss of fine control I had not felt since the day my mother died. She's been hiding nearly $300,000 from me. Yes. While we have been married. Yes. In New Zealand, that is relationship property under the Property Relationships Act. Half of it is legally yours. More importantly, Mr. Whitfield, the deliberate concealment of relationship property during a marriage is treated very seriously in our courts. It destroys credibility. And in any contested matters, including parenting time with adult children and spousal maintenance applications, a court will not look kindly on a partner who has run a structured deception for the better part of 2 years. I looked across the room. My wife was laughing again. Roland was lifting his flute. They looked like two people who had every angle covered, every dollar accounted for, every excuse rehearsed. They had not accounted for me sitting 2 tables away on the night of my own anniversary. And they had not accounted for Ngire Thornbury. Why are you telling me this? Your client is the ex-wife. What do you get from helping me? She looked at me directly. My client wants the $8 million. Your wife is the trigger. Roland is the contract violator. The photographs from tonight, the hotel records from this evening, and from previous nights, the financial trail through Harbourline Advisory. All of that goes into Patience's affidavit. Patience gets her settlement. As for me, I get the collateral. Everything I have on your wife. The timeline, the hidden account, the pattern of conduct, can be lawfully released to you because nothing privileged was used to obtain it. I am not your investigator. But the evidence does not care whose hand it ends up in. Is that allowed? I am licensed under the Private Security Personnel and Private Investigators Act. My methods have been vetted by counsel. My findings are documented and admissible. I have no obligation to withhold from you what I have lawfully discovered about a person you are currently married to. She paused. Mr. Whitfield, I worked for Inland Revenue's Investigations Division for 16 years before I went out on my own. I have watched a lot of marriages end. Most of them end loud. Shouting in driveways, things broken on the lawn, scenes in restaurants exactly like this one. Those endings feel marvelous for about 10 minutes. Then they turn into 10 years of regret and a smaller settlement than the wronged party was entitled to. She nodded toward the corner. I am offering you the other kind of ending. The quiet one. The one where you walk out of this restaurant tonight without saying a single word, and 6 months from now, your wife is sitting in a mediation room watching everything she built on top of your trust come apart in front of her solicitor. I sat there for what felt like a long time. The piped music kept going. The room kept murmuring. My wife of 40 years drank champagne with the man who had paid her $270,000 to lie to me. And I made a decision. Tell me what you need me to do. Go home. Sleep if you can. Tomorrow morning, ring a matrimonial lawyer. Not the one who did your will. A specialist. I will send you my full file by secure courier. The photographs, the hotel records, the financial summary, the affair timeline. Your lawyer will know what to do with it. Tonight, they will leave here together and go to the Sofitel, and your colleague will document it. Time-stamped photographs, footage of arrival and departure, receipt for the suite. By tomorrow morning, you will hold a folder no family court judge in this country can ignore. I looked at the kowhai in the chair. Yellow, already curling at the petals. The flowers she had carried in 1,984 inches front of 2 witnesses and a registrar. I had bought, or rather picked, that bouquet for a woman who no longer existed. Perhaps she had not existed for a long time. Perhaps the woman who had promised me the rest of her life in that small office in Newmarket had quietly vanished somewhere in the last few years. and I had carried on talking to the empty space, the way a man keeps talking to his dog after the dog has wandered off into another room. I stood up, left a 50 on the table for the wines, picked up the flowers. "Mr. Whitfield," she said. I turned. Many happy returns. It was not cruel. It was not sarcastic. It was the quiet acknowledgement of a woman who had been in this game long enough to know that sometimes the only gift you can hand someone is the truth, even when the truth has an edge on it. I walked out of the Pier Master at 9:05. I went past the bar, past the lectern, past the young woman who smiled at me again, with that sweet pity reserved for older men dining alone. I did not look at the corner table. I did not look at my wife. I did not look at the dress I had paid for, or the champagne I had not paid for, or the hand that was once mine and now belonged to a man whose father had owned 2 streets in Parnell. I got into the Hilux, set the flowers on the passenger seat, started the engine, drove home to Mount Eden under the orange wash of the streetlights and the soft rain that had started to come in off the Manukau. The house was quiet. Our 2 children were grown and gone. Hamish was 38, an engineer in Wellington, married, 2 boys of his own. Briar was 35, a midwife in Tauranga, recently engaged to a paramedic she adored. There were no children to check on, no babysitter to pay. There was just the long hallway, the kitchen we had renovated together in 2003, the photographs on the mantel of weddings and graduations, and one badly framed portrait of the 4 of us at Piha when the children were still small. I stood in the kitchen for a long time without turning the light on. I thought about the woman I had married and the man she was with, and the $270,000 she had hidden from me, and the 19 months of small and decorative lies I had mistaken for the natural drift of long marriage. I did not cry. I wanted to. The tears would not come. Something harder than tears had set in my chest, somewhere between the kiss across the table and the hand on my arm. Not rage, not quite grief. Resolution. The cold structural certainty that I was going to take the life my wife had built on my back and dismantle it with the same patient steadiness I had used for 40 years to frame houses that were still standing in Westmere and Sandringham, long after the men who built them had retired. Houses do not stand because you shout at the timber. They stand because every joint is true. Every load goes where it is supposed to go, and nothing is left to chance. The lights were about to go out on Marigold Fay Whitfield, and the framing was already mine. Let me tell you who I am. Because what my wife did to me only makes sense if you understand the man she did it to. My name is Donal Whitfield. I was born in 1,955 inches estate house in New Lynn, the second of 5 children to a freezing works fitter and a school cleaner. We were not poor in the way that people who have never been poor describe poverty. We were simply careful. My father worked 12-hour shifts at the Westfield Works for 31 years, came home, ate, washed, slept, and went again. My mother cleaned 3 primary schools and never once told us the names of any of the teachers, because in her view, those people were her employers, and you do not talk about your employers at the dinner table. I left school at 15, the way a lot of West Auckland boys did in 1970, and went to my uncle's joinery in Avondale to learn to read a tape measure. I was qualified as a builder by the time I was 21. I started my own small outfit, Whitfield Carpentry, in 1980, with 1 ute and 1 apprentice, and a fixed-price book that nearly bankrupted me before the first winter. By 2000, I had 6 men, 2 utes, contracts with 3 architects in Mount Albert, and a reputation across central Auckland for arriving at the time I said I would arrive and not charging for materials I had not used. I never had Roland Castell Burrows money. I had enough to buy our villa in Mount Eden in 1992, when villas in Mount Eden could still be bought by working families, and enough to put 2 children through good state schools without ever telling them we were tight. That was the whole point of the work, to make the tightness invisible. I met my wife in 1982 at a friend's barbecue in Henderson. She was 24, a paralegal at a small firm in Newmarket, saving for her law degree at Auckland Uni. I was 28, 3 years into Whitfield carpentry, wearing a clean shirt with paint on the cuff because I had come from a job and had not had time to change. She did not mind the paint. She said it suggested I worked for my living, which was a relief after a year of going to dinners with men whose hands had never been near anything heavier than a fountain pen. We were married on the 12th of October, 1984. 40 people. A registrar in Newmarket. A reception at her aunt's place in Devonport with sausage rolls and cheap sparkling wine, and her father's cousin playing accordion on the lawn. My mother made the pavlova. Her parents drove up from Hamilton, and my father-in-law shook my hand and said, "Look after her, son," in a tone that suggested he half expected I would not. I had every intention of proving him wrong, and for 40 years I thought I had. For 30 years it was good. Not perfect. Real. The kind of marriage where you argue about the gutters and reconcile before bed and drive the children to Saturday morning sport with the radio on and the quiet, unspoken understanding that this, the whole of this, is what you signed up for. Hamish was born in 1986. Briar in 1989. We rewired the villa together in 1995, which is to say I rewired it, and she made cups of tea and held the torch and asked sensible questions about why a particular cable went where it went. She finished her law degree at 31, while the children were still small, by sheer bloody-minded persistence, and I have never been prouder of anyone in my life than I was on the day she walked across the stage at Auckland Uni and turned and looked at me in the audience. She joined a small commercial firm in Newmarket, then a bigger one in the city. Then, in 2017, when she was 59 and I was 63, and we were beginning to talk seriously about my retirement, she took the general counsel role at Castell Burrows Holdings. The pay was substantial. The hours were brutal. She was, she said, finally being treated as the senior lawyer she had quietly been for a decade. The drift began, looking back, in the middle of 2022. Gradual, the way drift always begins. She was at the office later. She was less interested in the small daily threads that hold a long marriage together. The "how was your day?" The "did you remember?" The "I saw a tui in the kowhai." The conversations grew shorter, then less frequent. Then they more or less stopped. We still spoke. We just no longer said anything that mattered. I told myself it was the job. I told myself it was the pressure of being the most senior woman in a room full of men who had inherited their seats. I told myself it was the ordinary erosion that any 40-year marriage walks through, when the romance has long since become routine, and you have to choose, again, every morning, to keep going. I chose to keep going. I planned the anniversary dinner at the Pier Master, because she had mentioned, 6 months back, that a colleague had been there, and the lamb was very good. I bought the blazer. I picked the kowhai from our back garden. I made the booking on the morning of the day. She, it turned out, had also remembered my booking. She had simply chosen another dinner, with another man, on the same night, in the same restaurant, and trusted that her bored excuse was thick enough to keep me away. The morning after, I rang Tama Bellingham. Tama was 62, a matrimonial barrister whose chambers were on Shortland Street, formerly an Army legal officer, the kind of lawyer who answers his own phone and does not waste the first half hour on small talk. "Walk me through it," he said, pouring instant coffee out of a battered red tin into 2 mugs that had clearly been chosen at random from the office sink. I walked him through it. The message. The restaurant. Nguyer Thornberry. Roland Castell Burrows. The fidelity clause. The Harbourline Advisory account. The $270,000. He listened without interrupting once. When I was finished, he set the mug down and said, "How do you feel?" Like I've been building a house for 40 years and someone's just told me the foundations were poured on the wrong section. That'll do. He opened a yellow legal pad. Right, listen. New Zealand is a no-fault separation jurisdiction. We do not need to prove adultery. What we do is establish the fact of separation, and then we go after the relationship property under the Act. Adultery is not the lever. Hidden assets are. Concealment of nearly $300,000 of relationship property over 19 months is, in our work, a gold-plated lever. It will tilt every discretionary decision in this matter in your direction. The fact that the money came from her boss, paid through a shell company designed to avoid detection by you, is not just deception, Donal. It is something the court will treat as a deliberate, structured fraud against the relationship. We will be filing for an unequal division under Section 13 on the basis that equal sharing would be repugnant to justice. Spousal maintenance? You have stepped down to part-time. She has an executive salary. We will be asking for interim spousal maintenance, and we will be asking for a costs award against her if she fights it. We will be asking for the full Harbourline balance to be treated as relationship property, not as her personal savings, and we will be asking the court to draw an adverse inference from the manner in which it was structured. We will also, and this is important, be writing to Castell Burrows Holdings and asking some uncomfortable questions about a senior officer of that firm using a corporate vehicle to pay relationship property defeating amounts to its general counsel. He looked up. How long do you want this to take? As long as it has to. 6 to 9 months. If she has any sense, she'll settle inside 3. And Donal, yes, you did the right thing in that restaurant. Most men would have flipped the table. You sat down. That moment is going to win you this case. I did not feel patient. I felt as though something had crawled inside my ribs and was slowly tightening a clamp. That is what patience feels like when it actually matters, he said. And Geyer's file arrived by courier the following Wednesday in a plain manila folder bound with a rubber band. 63 photographs across 4 months. Time-stamped entries and exits at the Sofitel, Suite 1106, on 14 separate occasions. 2 folders of bank records from Harbourline Advisory traced to a Castell Burrows Holdings nominee account. A copy, lawfully obtained, of the firm's own internal HR policy, signed by my wife in 2017, which prohibited romantic relationships between executives and senior reporting staff, and required disclosure to the chair of the board within 7 days of any such relationship beginning. There was also a copy of Imogen Whitcomb's sworn affidavit from the 2020 proceedings, describing the previous pattern. Roland's behavior was not a slip. It was a habit. Tama filed under the Property Relationships Act on the 7th of November, 2024. My wife was served at her chambers at Castell Burrows Holdings on the 11th floor at 4 in the afternoon. In front of the open door of Roland's office. She came home that evening with her makeup wrecked. Donal, what is this? Why are you doing this? I was sitting at the kitchen table. The kowhai one I had built her in 1996 for her 38th birthday. There was a glass of water in front of me. Nothing else. No folder. No laptop. No props. Just me and the truth and the cold, steady knowledge that the framing of this conversation, like the framing of the table she was leaning on, had been done long before she walked into the room. You know why. Is this because I've been working too much? Donal, I told you. The firm is at a critical point. We're closing 2 syndicates this quarter. I cannot just marigold. Stop. She stopped. I was at the Pier Master on our anniversary. I saw you. The color went out of her the way the color goes out of a wall when you cut the power to the lamp behind the plaster. All at once. Complete. You were? I had a table booked for us. At 8. I sat 2 tables away from you, and I watched you kiss Roland Castel-Burrows, while the message you sent me about the board was still glowing on my phone. She sat down on the floor. Not in a chair. On the floor, against the leg of the table. The way a child sits when its legs have stopped working. It is not what you think. It is exactly what I think. 19 months. $270,000 in an ASB account in your sole name, paid by a shell company that exists for the sole purpose of paying you. 14 visits to Suite 1106. 63 photographs. Records, receipts, bank trails. His ex-wife's sworn affidavit from the last time he did this. I took a slow sip of water. I know everything, Marigold. I did not snoop. I did not rifle through your handbag. Someone else was watching your boss for entirely separate reasons, and you walked into their photographs. Who? Who was watching? That part is not your business now. Donal, please. I will end it tonight. I will end it tonight, and we will go to counseling. We will do the work. 40 years. Donal, please. You wore the green dress I watched you turn around in the bedroom to a dinner with another man on the night of our 40th. You sent me a message with hearts in it from across the table from him. You have been receiving $15,000 a month from him for 19 months into an account I did not know existed. I set the glass down very carefully. Counseling does not fix that. Marigold. Nothing fixes that. She stayed on the floor for a long time. I left the kitchen, went into the front room, sat for an hour in the dark looking at the photograph on the mantel of the 4 of us at Piha, with the children in their togs and her smiling at the camera with her hair full of sand. That was the last conversation of any substance my wife and I ever had. The matter took 5 months. Tama was relentless and quiet. The way I had been relentless and quiet on building sites for 40 years. He filed for unequal sharing under Section 13 on the basis of the deliberate concealment, and the court accepted it. The Harbourline balance, by then $294,000, was added to the relationship pool in full, and the court made an order, on Tama's application, that an additional $200,000 from her share be reallocated to mine on the basis that equal sharing would be repugnant to justice. We took the family home, which she had wanted to sell, off the table on the basis that I intended to live in it and she had voluntarily moved out. Spousal maintenance was set at $1,500 a fortnight for 2 years. On the basis that I had reduced my hours in expectation of joint retirement, and she had not. Tama also wrote, as he had said he would, to the chair of Castel-Burrows Holdings, enclosing a copy of the 2017 HR policy signed by my wife and a brief, careful summary of the established conduct. 2 months later, on quiet advice from her own counsel, she resigned. The firm did not contest. There was no severance, because the firm had her own signed policy in front of them. Roland survived as managing partner for another 8 months, at which point 3 of the firm's largest investors, having heard the story through the small confiding channels by which Auckland passes information about itself, withdrew their syndicate commitments. The firm did not collapse. Firms like that do not collapse. It was simply diminished. He went, in the local phrase, from being respected on Shortland Street to being merely tolerated, which for a man like that is its own kind of life sentence. Patience Hollander received her $8 million in May 2025. Enger Thornberry sent me a short note on plain card. The waiting was worth it. I hope what comes next is lighter than what came before. I kept the card in the top drawer of the desk for the better part of a year before I put it away. It is October 2025 now. The first of the spring days. The kowhai in the back garden is in full bloom again, the way it always is at this time of year, dripping yellow against the back fence. I did not go to the Pier Master on the 12th this year. I did not buy flowers. Hamish drove up from Wellington with the boys. and Briar came up from Tauranga with her fiancé. And we sat on the deck and ate lamb that I had cooked too long and drank a single bottle of Pialo. Between the 4 adults, and the boys ran around the lawn shouting at a tui. Hamish, who is steady the way his grandfather was steady, said quietly to me at the sink while we were doing the dishes, "Dad, you did it right. We watched you do it right." That was all he said. That was enough. Briar rang her mother on the Sunday. The way she has rung her mother every other Sunday since the separation. Because she is gentler than her brother, and she has decided that her own children, when they come, will know their grandmother. I did not object. I have never objected. The choice to keep that line open is hers, and there is no version of love that closes a child's door to her own mother because the mother failed her father. I am 69 now. I am still on at Whitfield Carpentry 2 days a week, mostly to mentor the young apprentice we took on last year, a quiet boy from Glen Eden named Hemi, whose hands remind me of mine at 21. My brother-in-law Pete comes by on Friday evenings with a six-pack and unsolicited opinions on the cricket. My mother is gone. 10 years now, but I think of her every time I make pavlova, which is badly. A few weeks ago I was driving Hemi to a job in Te Atatu, and he asked me, the way young men sometimes ask older men in utes when they are not looking at each other, "Donal, how do you know when something's gone wrong in a build?" 2 ways, I said. Either the level tells you or your gut tells you. And the dangerous job is the one where the level is fine, but your gut is humming. When that happens, you stop. You put the tools down. You go back to the last joint you were sure of, and you check forward from there. Most of the time it costs you a morning. Once or twice in a career, it saves you the whole house. He thought about that for a while. Then he said, "Is that what happened with you and your wife?" I looked at him. 22 years old, careful with his words, watching the road. Something like that, mate. The level was fine. The gut was humming. I should have stopped earlier. I did not. But the house is sound now. He nodded. Went back to looking at the road. If you are still listening, I want to say a few things plainly. Because I am 69, and the older I get, the less time I have for ornament. If your gut is humming, listen to it. You do not need proof. You need permission, and I am giving it to you now. If you find that proof, do not stand up. Do not flip the table. Do not give the person who has lied to you for 19 months the gift of your collapse in front of strangers. Sit down. Drink the wine. Let the people who know how this works do their work. Anger is a hammer. The law, used patiently, is a level. Tell your lawyer everything. Hide nothing. Concealment is a tool the deceiver has already used on you. Do not pick it up. Look after your children, even the grown ones. They are watching. They are deciding, in this season of your life, what kind of man their father is. Be quiet. Be steady. Do not speak ill of their mother in their hearing. The truth, like a load on a beam, will travel to the supports on its own. You do not have to push it. And if a stranger ever puts a hand on your arm in a restaurant and tells you the real performance has not started yet, weigh that voice carefully before you shake it off. Sometimes the universe sends you a person at the precise moment you need a person, and the only thing that is asked of you is that you sit back down. 40 years I built my marriage the way I built houses. True joints, hidden wiring, loads taken, where loads were meant to be taken. I did not know, until the very end, that the wall I was leaning on had been hollow for nearly 2 of those years. I know, now, the house is sound. The lights are on, and the man at the table, the one who walked in carrying yellow flowers for a woman who was already gone, is sitting on his own deck with his children and his grandchildren and a single glass of Pinot, and he is, against every expectation he had on the 12th of October last year, All right. Stay calm. The real performance always starts later than you think. And when it does, you want to be sitting down.